I'd like to talk about who we're running against. A billionaire who calls women fat broads and horse-faced lesbians. And no, I'm not talking about Donald Trump. I'm talking about Mayor Bloomberg. Democrats are not going to win if we have a nominee who has a history of hiding his tax returns, of harassing women, and of supporting racist policies like redlining and stop and frisk. Look, I'll support whoever the Democratic nominee is, but understand this. Democrats take a huge risk if we just substitute one arrogant billionaire for another.
We shouldn't have to choose between one candidate who wants to burn this party down and another candidate who wants to buy this party out. Look, we can do better.
Senator Sanders, are you polarizing?
If speaking to the needs and the pain of a long-neglected working class is polarizing, I think you got the wrong word. What we are trying finally to do is to give a voice to people who, after 45 years of work, are not making a nickel more than they did 45 years ago. We are giving a voice to people who are saying we are sick and tired of billionaires like Mr. Bloomberg seeing huge expansions of their wealth while 500,000 people sleep out on the street tonight. And that's what we are saying, Pete, is maybe it's a time for the working class of this country to have a little bit of power in Washington rather than your billionaire campaign contributors.
All right, look. We can actually empower workers and lift wages without further polarizing this country, and we can build a movement without having legions of our supporters online and in person.
All right, thank you.
I think it is
Democratic figures and union leaders alike.
Senator Warren, I have a question for you. On Sunday, on Meet the Press, Vice President Biden accused Senator Sanders' supporters of bullying union leaders here with, quote, vicious, malicious, misogynistic things. You said Democrats cannot build an inclusive party on a foundation of hate. Are Senator Sanders and his supporters making it harder for Democrats to unify in November?
Look, I have said many times before, we are all responsible for our supporters, and we need to step up. That's what leadership is all about.
Is that if you look at the Wild West of the Internet, talk to some of the African-American women on my campaign, talk to Senator Nina Turner, talk to others, and find the vicious, racist, sexist attacks that are coming their way as well. So I would hope that all of us understand that we should do everything we possibly can to end the viciousness and ugliness on the Internet. Our campaign is about issues.
But at a certain point, you got to ask yourself, why did this pattern arise? Why is it especially the case among your supporters?
I don't think it is especially the case, by the way.
That's just not true. Look.
Well, let me say something else about this, not being too paranoid. All of us remember 2016. And what we remember is efforts by Russians and others to try to interfere in our election and divide us up. I'm not saying that's happening, but it would not shock.
But we need to get everybody's health care plan out here. Mayor Buttigieg really has a slogan that was thought up by his consultants to paper over a thin version of a plan that would leave millions of people unable to afford their health care. It's not a plan, it's a PowerPoint. And Amy's plan is even less. It's like a Post-it note, insert plan here. Bernie has started very much, has a good start, but instead of expanding and bringing in more people to help, instead his campaign relentlessly attacks everyone who asks a question or tries to fill in details about how to actually make this work. And then his own advisors say, yeah, probably won't happen anyway. Look, health care is a crisis in this country. My approach to this is we need as much help for as many people as quickly as possible and bring in as many supporters as we can. And if we don't get it all the first time, take the win and come back into the fight to ask for more.
Somehow or another, Canada can provide universal health care to all their people at half the cost. UK can do it, France can do it, Germany can do it, all of Europe can do it. Gee whiz, somehow or another, we are the only major country on earth that can't do it. Why is that? And I'll tell you why. It's because last year the healthcare industry made $100 billion in profits. Pharmaceutical industry, top 6 companies, $69 billion in profit. And those CEOs are contributing to Pete's campaign and other campaigns up here.
Let's clear this
up.
up.
So maybe it is finally time that we said as a nation, enough is enough. The function of a rational healthcare system is not to make the pharmaceutical industry and the drug companies rich. It is to provide healthcare to all people as a human right, not a privilege.
Mr. Vice President,
no premiums, no co-payments, no deductibles.
And I noticed what everybody's talking about is the plan that I first introduced. That is to go and add to Obamacare, provide a public option, a Medicare-like option. It cost and increase the subsidies. It cost a lot of money. It cost $750 billion over 10 years. But I pay for it by making sure that Mike and other people pay at the same tax rate their secretary pays at.
Because many Democrats, including most of you on stage, have criticized President Trump for his lack of transparency. But Senator Sanders, when you were here in Las Vegas in October, you were hospitalized with a heart attack. Afterwards, you pledged to make, quote, all your medical records public. You've released 3 letters from your doctors, but you now say you won't release anything more. What happened to your promise of full transparency?
Well, I think we did. Let me tell you what happened. First of all, you're right.
I'm actually less concerned about the lack of transparency on Sanders' personal health than I am about the lack of transparency on how to pay for his health care plan, since he said that it's impossible to even know how much it's going to cost. And even after raising taxes on everybody making $29,000, there is still a multi-trillion-dollar hole. Matter of fact, if you add up his policies altogether, they come to $50 trillion. He's only explained $25 trillion worth of revenue, which means that the hole in there is bigger than the size of the entire economy of the United States.
Mayor Buttigieg.
The time has come to level with the American people on matters personal and on matters of policy.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. Let me ask you about something else. Several former employees have claimed that your company was a hostile workplace for women. When you were confronted about it, you admitted making sexually suggestive remarks, saying, quote, that's the way I grew up. In a lawsuit in the 1990s, according to the Washington Post, one former female employee alleged that you said, quote, I would do you in a second. Should Democrats expect better from their nominee?
Let me say a couple things, and if I can have my full minute and a quarter, thank you. I have no tolerance for the kind of behavior that the Me Too movement has exposed. And anybody that does anything wrong in our company, we investigate it, and if it's appropriate, they're gone that day. But let me tell you what I do in my company and my foundation and in city government when I was there. In my foundation, the person that runs it's a woman. 70% of the people there are women. In my company, lots and lots of women have big responsibilities. They get paid exactly the same as men. And in my in City Hall, the top person, my deputy mayor, was a woman, and 40% of our commissioners were women.
Senator Warren, you've been critical of Mayor Bloomberg on this issue.
Yes, I have, and I hope you heard what his defense was. I've been nice to some women. That just doesn't cut it. The mayor has to stand on his record, and what we need to know is exactly what's lurking out there. He has gotten some number of women, dozens, who knows, to sign non-disclosure agreements, both for sexual harassment and for gender discrimination in the workplace. So, Mr. Mayor, are you willing to release all of those women from those non-disclosure agreements so we can hear their side of the story?
We have a very few non-disclosure agreements.
How many is
Let me
that?
finish.
How many is that?
None of them accuse me of doing anything other than maybe they didn't like the joke I told. And let me just put, there's agreements between two parties that wanted to keep it quiet, and that's up to them. They signed those agreements, and we'll live with it.
So wait, when you say it is up to, I just want to be clear. Some is how many? And when you say they signed them and they wanted them, if they wish now to speak out and tell their side of the story about what it is they allege, that's now okay with you? You're releasing them on television tonight?
Senator? No.
Is that right?
Senator?
Tonight?
Senator, the company and somebody else, in this case, a man or a woman, or could be more than that, they decided when they made an agreement that they wanted to keep it quiet for everybody's interest. They signed the agreements, and that's what we're going to live with.
I'm sorry. No, the question is, are the women bound by being muzzled by you? And you could release them from that immediately, because understand, this is not just a question of the mayor's character. This is also a question about electability. We are not going to beat Donald Trump with a man who has who knows how many non-disclosure agreements and the drip, drip, drip of stories of women saying they have been harassed and discriminated against. That's not what we do as Democrats.
Senator Klobuchar, you're running on your Washington experience, but last week in a Telemundo interview, you could not name the president of Mexico or discuss any of his policies. Last night, you defended yourself saying, quote, "This isn't jeopardy." But my question to you is, shouldn't our next president know more about one of our largest trading partners?
Of course. Of course. And I don't think that momentary forgetfulness actually reflects what I know about Mexico and how much I care about it. And I first want to say greetings to President López Obrador. Secondly, what I meant by the game of Jeopardy is that I think we could all come up with things. You know, how many members are there in the Israeli Knesset? 120. Who is the president of Honduras? Hernandez. But when it comes to Mexico, I am the one person on this stage that came out first to say I was for the U.S. Mexican-Canadian trade agreement. That is going to be one of the #1 duties of a president, is to implement that. And I said that I made an error. I think having a president that maybe is humble and is able to admit that here and there maybe wouldn't be a bad thing.
But
if you could let me,
a good response?
If you could,
yeah, look, I wouldn't liken this to trivial. I actually didn't know how many members were in the Knesset, so
well,
you got me there.
Go.
But you're staking your candidacy on your Washington experience. You're on the committee that oversees border security. You're on the committee that does trade. You're literally in part of the committee that's overseeing these things. And we're not able to speak to literally the first thing about the politics of the country to ourselves.
Are you trying to say that I'm dumb, or are you mocking me here, Pete?
I'm saying that you shouldn't trivialize that
I made an error. People sometimes forget names. He's basically saying that I don't have the experience to be president of the United States.
I specifically asked you if you could name the president of Mexico, and your response was no.
Yes, that's right.
Judge, will taxes on those businesses go up under you?
Not if they are small businesses. I mean, what we've got to do is level the playing field, where a company like Amazon or Chevron is paying literally zero on billions of dollars in profits, and it puts small businesses like the ones that are revitalizing my own city, often Latino-owned on our west side, at a disadvantage. We need to recognize that investing in Latino entrepreneurship is not just an investment in the Latino community, it is an investment in the future of America. And it is time for a president who understands the value of immigration in lifting up all of our communities and our country. We're getting the exact opposite message from the current president. And it is time to recognize not just the diversity of the Latino community, but the importance of issues like economic empowerment.
You know, when we talk about a corrupt political system bought by billionaires like Mr. Bloomberg, it manifests itself in a tax code in which not only is Amazon and many other major corporations, some owned by the wealthiest people in this country, not paying a nickel in taxes, we have the insane situation that billionaires today, if you can believe it, have an effective tax rate lower than the middle class. So
Senator,
maybe
you're
just
the tax code. Why are you complaining?
What?
You wrote the code. You
did. You and your campaign. Not me. You and your campaign contributions electing people who represent the wealthy and the powerful.
Yes,
those are the folks.
Democrats. Thank you.
Well, and Republicans too.
Okay.
And George W. Bush as well.
I think that employee ownership of companies is a great idea. I'm not sure it makes sense to command those companies to do it. If we really want to deliver less inequality in this country, then we got to start with the tax code. And we got to start with investments in how people are able to live the American dream, which is in serious decline. Matter of fact, last time I checked, the list of countries to live out the American dream, in other words, to be born at the bottom and come out at the top, we're not even in the top 10. Number one place to live out the American dream right now is Denmark. And
Thank you. It is my policy, and I'm very proud of that policy. All right? What we need to do to deal with this grotesque level of income and wealth inequality is make sure that those people who are working, you know what, Mr. Bloomberg, it wasn't you who made all that money. Maybe your workers played some role in that as well. And it is important that those workers are able to share the benefits. Also, when we have so many people who go to work every day and they feel not good about their jobs, they feel like cogs in a machine. I want workers to be able to sit on corporate boards as well so they can have some say over what happens to their lives.
Mayor Bloomberg.
This is a tax on the top 0.1% in America, and it permits us to start to restructure our economy. It means we can afford universal child care for every baby in this country age 0 to 5. It means we can have universal pre-K for every child in America. It means we can raise the wages of every child care worker and preschool teacher and stop exploiting the black and brown women who do this work. It means we can put $800 billion into our public schools, quadruple funding for Title I schools, and as a former special education teacher, we could fully fund IDEA so children with disabilities would get the full education they need. We could do college. We could put $50 billion into our historically black colleges and universities, and we could cancel student loan debt for 43 million Americans.
Thank you.
That's something a majority of Americans support, a 2-cent wealth tax. It is a question of values. Do we want to invest in Mr. Bloomberg, or do we want to invest in an entire generation of young Americans?
Let's talk about democratic socialism, not communism, Mr. Bloomberg. That's a cheap shot. Let's talk about democratic. Let's talk about what goes on in countries like Denmark, where Pete correctly pointed out they have a much higher quality of life in many respects than we do. What are we talking about? We are living in many ways in a socialist society right now. Problem is, as Dr. Martin Luther King reminded us, we have socialism for the very rich, rugged individualism for the poor.
Wait a second.
Let me finish. When Donald Trump gets $800 million in tax breaks and subsidies to build luxury condominiums, that's socialism for the rich. When Walmart, we have to subsidize Walmart's workers who are on Medicaid and food stamps because the wealthiest family in America pays starvation wages. That's socialism for the rich. I believe in democratic socialism for working people, not billionaires. Health care for all, educational opportunity for all.
Senator, thank you. Mayor Bloomberg, would you like the question was about socialism.
What a wonderful country we have. The best-known socialist in the country happens to be a millionaire with 3 houses. What I miss here?
Well, you'll miss that I work in Washington, house 1.
That's the first problem.
Live in Burlington, house 2.
That's good.
And like thousands of other Vermonters, I do have a summer camp. Forgive me for that.